Hey, hey everybody. Welcome to the virtual small batch concert today with Jonathan Scales, who is an extraordinary steel panist. We'll meet him in just a moment. But before we get started, I do want to thank the folks who have made this event possible. And hang on just a minute, I've got to mute myself. There we go. Sorry, technical difficulty. Um, I want to thank Free Range Brewing because they have been behind the small batch series since the beginning, and we cannot gather at Free Range like we usually do for small batch concerts. We miss doing that, and hopefully we'll be doing those in person again sometime soon. But Free Range is still open. They've got lots of options available for grab and go, and they'll even bring your order out to your car if you order online. Also, thanks to Carolina Asthma and Allergy, Steinway Piano Gallery of the Carolinas, Richard Krumdiek, and Peter and Jackie Hohenstein for sponsoring the Small Batch series. We could not do this without them. So today, you, I bet, are going to have an experience you haven't had before. You're going to hear the steel pans played in a way that few people play them by Jonathan Scales. Jonathan Scales is originally from North Carolina. He's a graduate of App State University, where he got a degree in composition. So he is a composer as well as a steel pan virtuoso. And he and his orchestra, I guess in times when we don't have a pandemic, they play everywhere. They've even gone around the world and they toured Asia in 2017 as representatives of the U.S. State Department. So, Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Well, welcome to Small Batch. It's so great to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, you're not in North Carolina right now,
I'm in
correct?
Brooklyn, New York right now.
Okay. Is that your new base of operations?
That is my new base of operations
And I guess forever until the pandemic is over, that's where you'll be.
and beyond. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't you just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and or what you're going to play first?
All right. So, firstly, I want to acknowledge my good friend Ignacio Rivas Bixio on the drums. My good friend, my good neighbor, and um, crazy times where we don't get to play music with a lot of people right now. So it's cool that we get to play music with each other for you all right now. So we're very grateful for that. And we're just going to jump right into it. Really, we're going to start with a song called Focus Poem.
Okay.
One, two, three, one, two, three. Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome. And can you tell us the names of those pieces?
Yeah, so the first piece we played was one called Focus Poem. And it's just a piece that I wrote about just staying focused and dedicated no matter what's going on around you. You'll find that all of my pieces kind of have some type of meaning, even though they're all instrumental. And the last piece was one of mine called Jam We Did. And it's kind of like this just primal feeling thing that I came up with years ago as a way to kind of just like open our minds up, clear the air a little bit. Um, I threw in a famous hymn in there called "Lift Every Voice and Sing." Some people may recognize that, but every now and then, if I feel the inspiration, you might slip something in there every now and then. So subliminal
So it
messages.
changes? Are you saying it changes sometimes?
Well, I'm just saying that just as when you're playing improvised music, you have the freedom to bring in creativity from wherever, just spontaneously. So there's a couple little shout outs in there musically that I may have put out there. Yeah,
So talk a little bit about how you ended up playing steel pan. Um,
that's a great
you're a
question.
composition student at App State, and as you told me before, you were studying the compositions of people like Beethoven and, you know, classical
Yeah.
composers. So, what's your journey
Uh,
been?
so it would all to me. It all started. I won't give you a long story, but it all started when I was a kid, maybe in the sixth grade. I started playing saxophone in the sixth grade, and around that same time, I got really interested in composition. My dad had this book in the house. It was a textbook called Orchestration, and as a kid, I would just look at the book and see these like orchestral excerpts, and just get really excited about music. And so I tried to write music when I was in the sixth grade, and that's when I really started on this path. And make a long story short, I went to college to pursue that as a saxophone player. And upon arriving at App State, uh, some of my friends told me about the steel band. Actually, one friend in particular, her name is Rebecca. I don't know if she's watching, but Rebecca told me about the steel band at App State, and it changed the trajectory of my whole life. So I didn't plan on that. I didn't plan on ever playing this instrument, but as soon as I played it for the first time, I just kind of fell in love with it and just kept going from there.
Well, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, its history, because I think it's pretty interesting history. And if you have a moment, maybe show us how it works, because the logic
Okay,
on it is not like most other instruments, right?
right. I'll give you a brief history, uh, mostly due to the fact that there's so many resources out there that can explain it way better than I can, and more just more accurately and just more effectively. But it comes from the two island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. And if you are looking on your phones on the map, if you don't know where Trinidad is, it's the southernmost island in the Caribbean, 7 miles off the coast of Venezuela, all the way down at the bottom of the Caribbean, at the Lesser Antilles. And like a lot of areas in this part of the world, they were under colonial rule at one point, and any instruments that came from Africa or any form of African expression musically was banned. And so, jumping ahead, people found ways to make music in any ways they can, including um, hitting bamboo and hitting metal cans and things like that. And at the time, there were a lot of discarded 55-gallon oil barrels there that that were later fashioned into these instruments by just the youth there at the time. And there's, like I said, that's just like the brief overview. Don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole today, but it's a pretty beautiful history, and I'm happy to be just like a little part of it. In terms of the instrument
Yeah, show
itself,
us how they work.
all right, so it's hard to do it maybe from here, but I will if I can do this for a second. If you can see inside there, Um, each of those indentions are a different pitch, just like you have the different keys on a piano. Each of those surfaces, each of those, we'll call them dents for now. Each of those dents are tuned to a different note. So a lot of people often wonder if I can play other music, and you can play anything that any other instrument can play because all the notes are there. So you can play classical music, you can play any kind of music, really. So, but once again, that's just like a very simplified overview of, you know, because some people have never seen the instrument up close. So,
Right. Do you have to have two of them to be able to play all the notes?
that's an excellent question. So, in the same way where you have an orchestra, like a symphony orchestra with violins, violas, and all the way down to bass and things like that, the steel orchestra is like that as well. So this would kind of be like the alto voice almost in the steel orchestra. Okay. If you're in the pan community, you know that this particular this particular set are called double seconds. So that's the alto voice of the steel pan orchestra. And if you see someone playing one drum with all the notes on that one drum, that's kind of the soprano voice of the steel orchestra. And it goes all the way down through tenor, double seconds, all the way down to cello, guitar, and bass, each instrument having their own roles, whether it's comping the chords or playing the bass line or playing the melodies and the harmony. So it's just like a full orchestra, really. Yeah.
So, what do you got for us next?
Okay. So this is a great segue. So when I went to App State in the mountains of North Carolina, I got really into bluegrass. So for some crazy reason, I decided to see what would happen if I mesh bluegrass styles mixed with like more traditional things that you would hear in the steel pan. So I came up with this thing I call it pangrass, trying to mix those styles along with my own kind of style of odd meters and different style changes and things like that. So this is called pangrass. One, two, one, two, All right. Now I'm going to play a solo piece, actually, and this is one that I want to send out to my dad, James Scales Jr., if you're listening right now. But my dad was in the Army. He was in the 82nd Airborne Division out of Fort Bragg. So he used to jump out of airplanes for a living. And this is a piece that I wrote to commemorate all the work that my dad did in that regard. Just to kind of think about what it must be like to jump out of a plane and remember all your training and how everything works so that you can land safely back at home at the end of the day. And this is called Airborne. So shout out to my dad. And ironically enough, my dad called me last night and was telling me all of his stories about jumping out of a plane. And I'll spare you the details, but I'm gonna send this one out to James. Thank you very much. We're gonna do one more before we take more questions, but this is one that I wrote in the 10th grade, and it's called Deserts. It's one of my earliest compositions, actually, that's still alive somehow. One, two, one, two, three.
So, Jonathan, one of the comments that came up in the stream from Ethan Uslan, who is a really great pianist, specializes in old time music, is you must have been a really cool 10th grader.
You know, I don't know how to answer that. I just know that when I was in 10th grade, I was really into so when I was in ninth grade, I really got into Bach, like hardcore, and specifically into the Brandenburg concertos, which I'm sure your station knows very well. But yeah, that was the first CD that I actually bought was Brandenburg concertos in the ninth grade, and I listened to that thing over and over and over and over and over, and I was just really amazed by the way that Bach was interweaving all those parts and how everything was layered. Um, so ninth grade is when I started taking composing seriously. So I guess I was an interesting 10th grader. Yeah.
Unusual.
Yeah. I'm still weird. No, I'm still a weird person. I'm 35 and I'm still very strange. So
Well, that's good. Stay the path. Um, so I've been remiss. I haven't. We've done a good job in the comments of reminding people, but I do want to make sure you know that there is a tip jar for Jonathan and Ignacio, and they've got it pinned in the comments for this video. And we've had some questions from audience members. So the first one comes from Dustin McCall Gentis. I hope I said that right. Says, are you working on any new projects? He's been giving Pillar a listen, and that's your latest album, right?
it's 2 albums ago. So I did put out an album in between Pillar and Now, but Pillar, it's the one that I feel like really kind of defines, all the work I've done up to this point, and that's the one that I always tell people to start with. So but yeah, to answer that question, so Mason, Elon, and I are working on the next album, which is going to be a follow-up album to Pillar, actually, even though there is an album in between Pillar and the next album. Um, but due to things being how they are, that process has slowed down. Originally, that new album was going to come out in the fall. Now I'm not sure when that's going to come out. So now I'm just kind of taking it day by day, moment by moment. But the most recent thing that I did was a documentary about the making of Pillar. So Dustin, I think that's your name. If you check out the making of Pillar on YouTube, that's the most recent thing I've done. And right now I'm just taking it day by day, seeing what's going to be next. So that's a good question. Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, that was one question I was going to ask is kind of what are, and you sort of answered it, what are you doing these days since you have to be locked down? And how do you think this is going to affect you going forward? And musicians
So
like you.
I would say that for one, I'm still staying really busy between teaching lessons. I have a lot of composition students. So if you want to learn composition from me, you know where to find me. I've also randomly been teaching some Spanish, which I love to study languages and to share my knowledge of languages when the opportunity comes. Uh, I also have like so many random projects that have been on the back burner for so many years, like different video projects, like the making of Pillar that just came out a couple weeks ago. I've been sitting on that footage for 2 years, so I finally got around to releasing that video. So right now, my life is a series of just a bunch of unfinished projects that I now have time to kind of go back and finally put together for everyone. In addition to people asking me to record on their albums and things like that. And then live streams like this. So I'm staying pretty busy.
It's funny how this pandemic has actually opened up time and space for things that you're talking about. I know that's been true for
Yes.
me, and I've heard other people say the same thing. Had a question here from J.R. Clark, who says, are there different mallets for different effects with the pans?
So there's probably some really obscure mallets out there that are very specialized by individual people, but generally, um, um, you have wooden or aluminum shafts. These are aluminum. They're made by Mallet Man. Shout out to my good friend Emerald. Uh, and they have rubber tips here. And so the tips are going to be determined based on your instrument. So if you play an instrument that's a lower instrument with bigger notes, you're gonna have bigger tips on the mallet just to be able to get that fuller sound. So the mallet's really going to be based upon the range of your instrument, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Right.
So for like the bass steel pans, the mallets are almost like soft baseballs almost, in order for them to get those low frequencies.
Do you play all of those
I do
sizes?
not. There's some amazing guys out there that can transition between pans, but for me, um, the double seconds are where my heart is, and it's what I started on. And also, I feel like there's so much to be learned about this particular setup and this particular, configuration, that I've just dedicated all my time to this. So this is the only type of pan that I play. Sadly.
We don't play any pans over here, so. Um, Here's a question. So I don't know if you know this person or not, but Allison Willett says, Jonathan Scales, you rock.
Hey, Allison. Yeah, I know
And you
Allison.
do. A lot
Yeah.
of people are enjoying this. Um, let's see. There was one other thing here. I thought
Actually,
I
wait. You know
saw.
what? I think this is the
What?
same Allison, because I know two Allisons that their names are very similar to each other, their last names. But this might be the Allison we went to school together at App State, and she's a violin player or viola player. That might have been offensive, but I think she's a viola player, but might be violin. I don't know. She plays a stringed instrument, and we used to argue with each other all the time in theory class. We had the same like advanced theory classes, and we would argue with each other about just music theory actually. And the teacher, Dr. Fanghauser, would come in as me and Allison were arguing about whatever, and he would just allow us to argue for like half of the class about music theory and about just all these nerdy musical things.
Yeah, because he didn't have to teach.
Yes, he's probably watching this right now too, so shout out to him and hello to Allison. I hope that's the right
Um,
Allison too.
and I also wanted to let you know that we've got people apparently listening from Baltimore, Mooresville, North Carolina, Atlanta, Covington, Georgia, Gaston County, North Carolina, Clemens, North Carolina, Wilmington, and I probably missed some. But anyway, we've got folks from all over listening.
Sweet.
So,
Awesome.
um, all right. Got more music?
Yeah, we have a little bit more for you. um yeah, let's jump right into it. This one is going to have some audience participation. So I've never done this before in a virtual setting, but if you're at home and you're paying attention, then prepare your hearts and minds for a unique experience. So we're going to try to engage with you even though you're not here with us. So let's try it. One, two, one, two, three. All right, so we're going to try some audience participation here. And I have a reputation for writing complicated music, but right now I like to demystify what's going on here for the people at home. So most songs you hear on the radio, you count to 4 over and over, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, to your heart's content, or 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, over and over. So that gets kind of boring. So what we're going to do on this is we're going to count to 7 times, and then count to 6 1 time, twice as fast, okay? Like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Okay, so here's the thing. There's a lot of things happening in the world right now, you know, people of different races, religions, orientations, political affiliations. Everything out there to divide the people was out there. But what we're going to do today, and what we try to do everywhere we go, is try to unite the world by getting everyone to count to 7 times, and then count to 6 1 time, twice as fast. Okay, so can we do that, everyone? I can't hear you. Can we do it? Let's try it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was pretty good. Some of you guys are not participating. Maybe you're nervous. Let's try it one more time. One more time. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let me see if we have time for one more. All right, we have time for one more actually. Thank you all for listening. And this last one that we're gonna play is one called "The Longest November," and it's one that I wrote back in the day in my starving artist phase, where I was trying to make it right out of college with just a composition degree and trying to make my name in the world. I wrote this tune, and every time I play it, I think back to those times. Once again, clap at home for Ignacio Rivas Bixio on the drums. Also, the piece I played before that is called Ocean Church. And if you want to play that on any instrument, the music for that is on my website, which is jonscales.com, JON scales.com. So you can learn that. Allison, if you want to learn that, how to play that on the viola, then you should do that. And yes, this is The Longest November that we're going to play now.
That was great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening, and thanks for everyone out there listening. Really appreciate that.
You had a lot of great comments. I can tell people really enjoyed it, and people liked counting to seven. Ethan Uslan got so excited he counted to eight. So,
That is funny.
well,
Yeah,
it was
thank you very
great. It
much.
was so much fun, and thank you so much for giving us some of your time and showing us really this extraordinary way you play that instrument. It's awesome.
I appreciate the
And thanks to
opportunity.
Ignacio too.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
My pleasure. Yep.
All right. Well, I've got a couple of announcements that I have to make before we wrap up. Don't forget that we do have the virtual tip jar that you can get to in the comments here by the video. Also, I want to let you know, since we've had a concert of steel pan music, that we have a new podcast. It's called Power Play. It's on demand right now. And the very first episode is about Calypso, and it looks at the political messages of Calypso music from Trinidad and Tobago. So you might want to check that out. You can find a link in the comments and make sure that you click to subscribe. Also, we're starting a new initiative next week, a virtual initiative called Sound Bytes. It starts on Wednesday, June 24th at noon on Facebook Live. David Tang, Eric Banks, and Selena Brockington are going to be our guests, and we'll be discussing the advent of the virtual choir. I believe there will be some performances as part of that, too. And our next virtual small batch concert is next Friday, June 26th at 5 o'clock, and the Bayo String Quartet will be performing for us. This is part of the Charlotte New Music Festival, and there are links to those events again in the comments here on Facebook. So thanks so much for imbibing in place with us. I'm Rachel Stewart. This has been a virtual small batch concert from WDAV and Jonathan Scales today. And thanks again to Free Range Brewing, Steinway Piano Gallery, Richard Krumdiek, Peter and Jackie Hohenstein, and Carolina Asthma and Allergy. And we will see you next time. Have a great weekend.